Good afternoon. This is Clark Neighbors with BIS Commodities in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with the market recap for the week ending July 27th, 2018. For the week, December corn was up 6 cents, new crop beans up 24, and wheat up about 15 cents. 2 weeks ago today is about when we had the recent lows. Since that time, corn's up roughly 22 cents. Beans are up 50 cents and wheat up 35, and some of that's reflected looking at the commemorative trades report tonight. Funds have added to a long position in wheat, so the funds are actually long wheat at this point. They're still short beans, still short corn, but we saw very little change in the size of those longs over the last, or excuse me, the size of those shorts over the last week. And it felt like there was some short covering in this market. So in some cases that was kind of interesting to look at. The main news items this week was obviously the trade tariff talk, and also the USDA, or I should say, the USDA announced that they would dip into the CCC program for payments to farmers of $12 billion. No details on any of that at this point, other than some money coming out sometime this fall. But getting back to the trade story, midweek there was a meeting with the European Trade Council, Juncker, and President Trump. Sounds like at that time there was some progress made going forward with the U.S. and the European Union. That especially gave midweek an uptick in the soybean market. Also, there was some talk later in the week with President Trump's visit to Dubuque, Iowa, in regards to trade and opening up those, in his eyes, the European market, which is already the second or third largest buyer of soybean products out of the U.S. But at the same point, with this $12 billion CCC money, I think that what that's telling us is an end to this situation with China may take some time. And keep in mind, it looks like by a statement made today during the GDP for the last quarter on the economy being up 4.1%, there was a comment in that saying that the exports of soybeans were built up in the second quarter in anticipation of something like this, mainly exports to China as far as soybeans. And it was kind of interesting hearing the Wall Street analysts talk about soybeans having some impact on the gross domestic product being higher over the last quarter. Kind of interesting. They even referred to it as the magic bean. So I think soybeans have gotten more financial and Wall Street press over the last 2-3 weeks, and they probably have over the last 20 or 30 years, to be honest. So the interest level or the talking point is still there based on the political structure of those tariffs. Going forward, weather-wise, the next week looks normal to below normal temps, which should help in the progression of this crop. Keep in mind, most agronomists and USDA and so on talk about the crop, especially corn, being somewhere in the 7-day to 15 days ahead of normal. Thus, harvest may not be too far down the road. The key will be during the month of August, do we finish this crop in good condition? Most feel right now the crop is in very good condition in most locations of the Midwest. Yes, there are some areas that are a little dry. Yes, there are some areas that have been extremely wet. But in the big scheme of things, I think most are anticipating a pretty good-sized crop. Stay tuned. Movement this week seemed to pick up with the rally in the market as far as the grains are concerned. With harvest right around the corner, there's still some logistics, some old crop to move. Rail logistics, trucking logistics continue to be a tough situation. Just the volume that needs to move and the timeliness of that, something that's not going to go away overnight either. So many are looking and saying, well, do we have a low in this market? Maybe too soon to tell based on Got to see how big the supply of this crop is going forward. Right now it looks like those lows a couple weeks ago are a good basing point until we get through what the size of this crop is. But definitely keep that in mind that if the corn crop's bigger, bean crop is bigger than anticipated, we could one more time go down and test those lows. History would say in the last few years the low of these markets, especially the corn, tends to be in late August and early September. So going forward, topics to consider, obviously the trade and tariff talks, if anything new arises out of that. Like I said, this week is the first time we've seen some positive news on that with the European situation. And obviously weather, that's going to become less and less a factor as we get closer to harvest. So keep that in mind with movement, tightening up that window to get old crop moved, so basis levels, any kind of basis pop in the next 2-3 weeks needs to be taken advantage of, especially with the upcoming crop. Cattle market, funds are now long cattle. They continue to add length in that cattle market. The chart continues to have a decent formation to the upside. The futures market still trying to keep pace with cash. So even though there's that big supply of cattle out there, the demand for the beef and obviously the exports have had a lot to do with it, continue to be strong to help, not totally, but help offset that supply. Packer margins are still very, very large in that cattle trade. If you have any questions on any of these markets, feel free to call us at BIS Commodities. Phone number is 800-373-2525. Catch us on the web at www.biscommodities.com. With that, we wish everyone a very nice weekend.